Let's get right into the hidden mechanics of spiritual protection and human destiny. We constantly hear these amazing stories of miraculous escapes, but we rarely pause to look at the actual gears turning behind the scenes. In today's explainer, we are exploring the esoteric science of how a guardian spirit operates. We are stepping past the standard myths to investigate the highly precise, almost biological ways these unseen forces interact with our physical bodies to alter our fate. Imagine the sheer shock of a sudden, undeniable internal command. Take the case of a young Skittle boy setting up pins in a bowling alley. Out of absolute nowhere, a silent but intense voice yells at him, "Move!" He instinctively jumps out of the way, and a split second later, a massive Skittle ball crashes right into the exact spot where he was just standing. That momentary intervention saved his life. But it brings up a truly profound question. How does a guardian angel actually speak to us with such physical urgency? What is incredibly fascinating here is that the guardian spirit isn't framed as some mystical fairy tale. It is presented as a structured, physiological reality that works directly through our human organization. Drawing from the esoteric research of Rudolf Steiner, the concept is that the entire human being is essentially a complex sense organ. We aren't just bumping into the physical world. Our bodies are biologically wired to receive and process highly subtle spiritual data. It is a genuine spiritual biology of protection. When we look past the physical realm, we find a brilliant biological contrast. The human head, specifically the brain and our standard physical senses, is perfectly specialized for perceiving the outer material world and the distant stars. But here's the catch. The brain is not the primary receiver for spiritual entities. That crucial role actually falls to our lower internal organs. The liver, the lungs, and the stomach serve as our subtle spiritual sensors. These organs possess their own etheric and astral counterparts, which makes them uniquely attuned to vibrations that our intellect simply cannot pick up. The esoteric anatomy going on here is deeply intricate. Specific centers down near the abdomen, such as the navel center, are uniquely built to receive these astral influences. When this etheric center fires up, you actually begin to consciously feel spiritual currents right in your physical body. You might experience it as a sudden, vague feeling of friendliness, a wave of hostility, or an unexplained flash of apprehension. Fundamentally, the abdomen is acting as an ear to the unseen world. All this intricate biology brings us to a really curious mystery. If your liver or your stomach is receiving a life-saving warning, how on earth does your conscious mind understand it? We have to break the habit of assuming that spiritual entities speak human languages. They absolutely do not speak English, French, or German. Instead, they communicate in the language of the spirit, using subtle impulses and energetic gestures. The magic happens in this precise, entirely unconscious translation process. First, the spiritual entity sends a subtle impulse. Second, an internal organ, let's say the liver, receives this impulse because its subtle makeup is perfectly tuned to it. Third, that impression travels upward through your physical organization, right into the head. Finally, and most remarkably, you unconsciously translate that spiritual impulse into your own native language. And that is exactly why the young boy in the bowling alley heard a distinct "move" right at the moment of danger. The actual voice came from within his own translation mechanism. However, there is a major obstacle we face in the modern era. We can call it the barrier of the factual mind. Modern scientific thinking is incredibly useful for navigating our everyday physical reality, but it acts as a remarkably dense wall against the spiritual world. When our thinking becomes too rigid, overly factual, or even sloppy, it completely drowns out the subtle messages our internal organs are trying to send us. The guardian spirit cannot get the warning through to the conscious mind simply because the intellect refuses to process anything outside of strict material logic. Because of this rigid thinking, guardian spirits have to employ some truly remarkable, roundabout methods to make sure their life-saving warnings get through. If direct communication hits a wall, they get creative. They might stir up an overwhelming inner restlessness that absolutely forces you to change your physical location. In extreme situations, they might even induce a momentary paralysis in another person's muscles, stopping them from turning a wheel or taking a step that would result in a fatal accident. They work through the human organization, finding and using whatever temporary vulnerabilities they can to keep us safe. Let's look at an astonishing case that perfectly illustrates these roundabout routes. There was a highly factual, brilliant electrical engineer who was in imminent danger of suffocating in his sleep. Because his waking and sleeping mind was so utterly entrenched in material facts, his guardian spirit just could not reach him directly. Instead, the spirit used the astral body of his sick, sleeping sister-in-law who was in another room entirely. Her astral body was guided right to his bedside to give him a sudden, massive fright. It woke him up just in the nick of time to save his life. It is also worth noting that these interventions are incredibly frequent and intense during childhood. This period is a massive window of spiritual sensitivity. When we are young, the astral body is highly active, and our physical internal organs, such as the liver, are much softer and far more malleable. This physical and energetic flexibility makes it so much easier for spiritual impulses to transmit from the unseen world, land in the organs, and translate into an action that prevents a disaster. As we dig into this territory, it is absolutely crucial to maintain a strong level of scientific caution. We need to clearly distinguish genuine spiritual communication from what esoteric science calls mistaken clairvoyance. It is entirely possible for our standard physical senses to undergo an acute, temporary sharpening, often triggered by a severe illness or a physical trauma. This heightened physical sensitivity gets confused with true spiritual perception all the time, but the underlying mechanisms couldn't be more different. For instance, consider the well-documented case of a severely ill woman recovering in a fourth-floor apartment. She consistently knew exactly when her doctor was arriving at the front gate all the way down on the street. Observers immediately jumped to the conclusion that she was clairvoyant. But esoteric investigation revealed it was actually an extreme sharpening of her physical hearing, brought on by her prolonged confinement in bed. She was physically hearing those footsteps, not perceiving them spiritually. Recognizing these nuances is absolutely vital for developing a true science of the spirit. All of this hidden anatomy, the internal translation, the creative roundabout interventions, it all points to a profound underlying purpose. Why do guardian spirits go to such immense lengths to keep us alive? The answer is directly tied to the law of karma and the grand trajectory of our multiple lives on Earth. We do not just exist in a random vacuum. Our current life is deeply and intricately connected to past experiences and future obligations. Ultimately, these spiritual interventions step in to prevent a premature end to a life that still has unfinished work. If a sudden physical accident threatens to cause a disproportionately early death, one that would cut short the karmic development laid down in previous incarnations, the guardian spirit takes action. It utilizes our very biology to alter our destiny, ensuring we stay on the physical plane to learn the exact lessons we came here for. So, think back for a moment. Have you ever experienced a sudden, unexplainable urge that completely altered the course of your own destiny? Perhaps your internal organs were listening to a message your brain could not even begin to comprehend.